Hi, all. I sat down with my friend Chelsea Williamson, who is a licensed clinical social worker at Penn Medicine, Princeton House Behavioral Health. Chelsea has worked with high-risk adolescents conducting group, individual, and family therapy. Chelsea and I have a clinical discussion on mental illness, an honest conversation about our own experiences embracing mental wellness services, and we try to assess why society is failing to move the needle on improving mental health despite an openness among youth to address these issues. I hope you find our conversation as enlightening as I did. Chelsea, really excited to talk to you today about mental health, something I'm very passionate about. I'm a huge advocate for, and where you work, in industry in which you work. So really excited to get your perspectives, your insights, all of your knowledge as we walk through mental health. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm really excited to talk about something that I also am very passionate about. I have a lot of experience, and I feel like mental health is definitely being talked about more. So I'm really excited that you guys are focusing on this topic specifically.
Yeah. So here's the problem. How do we practically talk about mental health when such a stigma persists?
I think there are many different stigmas that are out there. And I think the ones that stick out the most are typically, just get over it, or, especially if it's teens, it's their hormones, they don't know any better. I think trying to create more conversation around mental health is going to start with, adults trying to create more of that safe space for teens, and just kind of speaking to breaking and what it looks like to really have those conversations, I think is creating more comfort around feeling. I think there's a huge stigma around emotions, and that emotions are bad and that we shouldn't feel them, and that makes us weak, and vulnerability is something to avoid or push away. And I think having more conversations around how someone's feeling can really start that conversation and break some of those barriers around why it is okay, to create, more insight into how someone is reacting to a situation or managing ultimately certain stressors or traumas in their life.
Why do you think this stigma exists? Is there, one reason why there's so much stigma, or what's created this issue?
I think as far as what's a huge factor to this issue, I think it's control. I think it's power at times with many individuals. I think there's also that gender inequality in the sense of, if we're focusing on males, showing emotion for them is known as being weak. There's a huge core belief around that when men show emotion that they're weak, and that even for females, when they show emotion, it's looked at as weak or not good enough, or they're not going to be able to handle pressure, let's say. And so I think it has to do with how society views gender. I think it has to do with there not being many, powerful people kind of portraying that it's okay to feel, and we can feel and still be successful, or we can feel and still accomplish our task that we're trying to get to in the long term. And so I think it really comes down to how we're viewing ourselves. And there is more talk around trying to create change in that, yet there is still that differential of how to be strong and powerful. And that doesn't include being vulnerable and being in with your emotions. And I still hear it today. Many patients come in and they're just like, we don't want to feel this. What can you do for us so we can stop feeling? And I think that's just been the idea for many people. That's how you solve all your problems, right? If I didn't feel anything, then I wouldn't have any of these issues. And that's why, individuals come to therapy, because we teach them how to feel and problem solve at the same time. And so trying to balance both is so daunting when you don't know how to do it. And so that's why, obviously I'm a big advocate for therapy as a therapist. And so a lot of it is skills deficit, and there's just not a lot of talk and knowledge and education around how to do that.
I'd like to kind of close on something Jared said. I think he really bookended the conversation. He talked about mental health and the stigma and maybe the lack of awareness that it's received given the magnitude of it and all the different ways that mental illness, mental wellness look. And then he talks about, the future that he envisions that we can solve these issues with benefits and spreading the word, which is great because he sees a problem and he sees a solution to it. But where do we steer him in terms of achieving that solution? Because there are benefits, there are walks, there are nonprofits, there's organizations like yours, Penn Medicine, Princeton House Behavioral Health. You're doing a lot of those things. So where does the gap exist that he can focus on filling to achieve the solution that he's looking at?
I think, yes, being more outspoken is huge. But what's sticking to me is what he mentioned, like adolescents not having enough support or adolescents not knowing what to do, or it kind of brings me back to what I was saying, like adolescents relying on adolescents. Right. And I think, not saying it's up to the adolescent to tell someone who's struggling to go seek support, yet I think that could be a direction to go in if like you notice that a friend or, whether you're an adolescent, an adult even, right? An adult's coming to you and saying like, hey, I'm really struggling with this, trying to create and normalize what, therapy and what that looks like and what that support. I think it goes with exactly what Jordan's talking about in the sense of talking about it more. And I think it's applying it to those situations where people are leaning on each other for this type of support that ultimately may not be meeting them where they're at, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I think the walks and the organization, like they're all there. I think it's in the moment trying to advocate for someone to receive that support when you're noticing that they're struggling emotionally. I think that's a place to start because I feel like we're like a broken record. It all starts with the stigma because it's true. It's creating more exposure. It's almost like exposure therapy to therapy. Like I had to go like 3 or 4 times before I was like, all right, this is kind of cool. And I kind of dig my therapist and we're vibing, right? Like that wouldn't have happened if I didn't give it a chance. And so yes, I think it starts with talking about it, advocating for it. Yet I also think it is helpful to recommend to people that are coming to you that are struggling, because I think that's where we all get stuck is like, oh, I can just vent to Kelly and talk to them every day of the week about how sad I am. Right. And that's not going to change anything. And think about how that's making Kelly feel. Right. So it's trying to recommend and create a little bit of that separation that, yes, our support systems are solid objects, yet sometimes we need a solid object that doesn't even know us. Right. That doesn't know my friend, doesn't know my family, and is just simply focusing on me. Because I think that's where the comfort with vulnerability comes into play when I'm more comfortable going to ultimately a stranger to talk about my problems. I think vulnerability can really change depending on who you're seeking support from, right? Like if you're seeking support from a friend or even like a guidance counselor or a school teacher, we may not be that true, authentic self that we may need to be to really focus on some of the core issues that we're struggling with and may continue to be struggling with.
And I think you make a good point too about there's only so much support two adolescents can give each other. It's seeking support from someone who's trained in it.
Right.
Because I mean, you and I have been exposed to therapy. Certainly you are far more knowledgeable than I am, just given your social work credentials. But you and I talking, I can tell you I'm sad day after day after day, and you can tell me go take a bubble bath and take a rest and go for a run, but that's not sustainable. That's not changing anything other than that one moment. It's not helping you understand how to deal with these emotions, unpack them. Why do you have them? What is the impetus for these issues that you're feeling? And it's not going to change if you just surface level default to just talk about it, go for a run. It's somebody who's trained in this and has the capacity that adolescents just don't have.
Absolutely. No, I really appreciate it, Kelly. This is super awesome that you guys are doing this. I think it's so helpful to get it out there and give, adolescents, all ages, just a platform to just be like, hey, this isn't working. We need help. And that's exactly why we're here, to kind of give them a platform to have a voice. And so I think it's awesome. So thank you.
I'd like to thank my friend Chelsea for joining me today. And I'd also like to thank those who made this podcast possible. Our wonderful production team, the George Milton Group, Winnie the Moog for our theme song, Success of the Whole Team, and my Teen Think Tank Project co-founder, Matthew DeSantis. Most importantly, I'd like to thank you, the listener. Let us know that you're listening. Subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And follow the podcast at problem_pod. For more information on today's topic, or to find out more about social justice programming for exceptional teens, please follow the Teen Think Tank Project at teen_think tank. Until next week, I'm Kelly Nagle.